happy to be back, and I'm sure the next one will be even better. You've heard a lot about Web 3.0, and I'm going to talk sort of where we started, where we come from, and where do we come from? There's been a little bit of talk about that as well. Those of us who remember Web 1.0. Okay, so I just want to say, how many people remember? Exactly. What was that noise? That was the internet. Yes, that was us back in the day. Back in Web 1.0, it was 1996, seems like forever ago. We actually had only about 250,000 sites that came up on Web 1.0. And very few people, right? We had 45 million users worldwide, and there was just one way. You got on the internet, you received the information, and really that was it. There was no two-way communication. There was not even email back then, right? And then we moved to the Web 2.0, has been discussed here as well, and some people missed it, right? We were in 2000, and there were things like Amazon had come up, and places like Target in the United States didn't even have a presence on the web. They actually started using Amazon as a storefront back in the day. So we hope that we learn from the lessons, and that we actually will realize that Web 3.0 is a thing. And it's not like, we talk about even digital transformation. It's not like we wake up one day, and I've only been at Microsoft 5 years. I spent 25 years in banking. So I've been most of my career in banking. So, I used to think it was funny that, those tech companies would come knocking on our door and they'd say like, digital transformation. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll take some of that. And they were like, so like, when I do digital transformation, am I gonna like wake up and I'll be digitally transformed? And like, oh, no. It's a process. You're a bank. It will be a long process because you all don't know how to move quickly, right? So, with that, but we did get there, right? We did. So I think in financial services, we don't want to sort of be lagging the next time, right? As this comes up to Web 3.0. And what are we talking about? What happened, and I feel kind of sad about it actually, is with Web 2.0, it became very centralized. We started out in the web, we couldn't find anything. It was like, we say garbage in, garbage out. You couldn't find anything on that wild. We called it not the World Wide Web, we called it the Wild West. We didn't know where or what to find. But then these few companies, we all know who they are, started bringing the internet that we had search, because we were able to then search and find things. And they were actually with tags that would, if you wanted something like dancing lessons, you could actually get web pages regarding dancing lessons instead of, donkeys who dance and this crazy thing that would come up, originally. But then with that, I think we lost something as well, right? We lost that a few companies could control us, who we are, right? And what we see and what we do. And at first that felt good. Like we talk about in marketing, the segment of one, right? Everything's personalized. Everything feels like it's just for me. I love it. But then with that comes a lack of autonomy as well, because everything. And so with the Web 3.0, the thing I like is I think we, the people, will be more in control. It'll be more decentralized, but we'll still be able to find things, right? So when I break it down, what do I think? What is, besides the facts of Web 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, what does that mean? Again, we talk about Web 1.0, we read things. 2, we read and write things. Facebook came up during that time, right? So we were able to just not read things, and we were able to, which was kind of cool, we could find friends we didn't necessarily want to find, but also ones we did want to find, right? And we could get connected to people in different ways. So think about Web 3.0 is read, write, and own. I like the idea of owning my own identity. I own, and we've seen things come out of Europe, especially with, you own. The banks don't own us, banks. We don't own the customer anymore. The customer chooses what information to share. The customer then gives what information to whom they want, when they want, and where they want. We see laws coming out of Europe and even in Brazil regarding this, right? It was just coming to LATAM as well. So what is the medium? The static text, the interactive content went to Web 2, and the virtual economies. And there's been a lot of talk about these virtual economies. I think, it's kind of like here to here, and how does it come from here to here, right? Like when I mentioned the word digital transformation. It just didn't wake up one day and I was a banker and I was like, oh, we're digitally transformed. There was a journey to get there, and sometimes a quite painful journey, but we got there, right? So thinking about the sort of this metaverse, we're here, and how do we slowly enable? And then network organization, right? We went from companies to platforms to then networks. Infrastructure, it was personal computers. We all remember the personal PS2, I think, was my first desktop. That's totally dating me, but it was, I thought it was cool with my floppy, had all of it going on, but things have definitely evolved in a much quicker, faster way as well. And then we think about this Web 2.0 was cloud and mobile, right? And now we're looking at these things called blockchain. Blockchain's been around for a long time, actually. It never was fully adopted by financial services, but now there's new use cases, and maybe that is sort of the future of how we enable this digital identity that can be taken from place to place and authenticated easily. And then control, we talked about, the decentralized, centralized, and then back to decentralized. So we see, where does this all come together? Like, how do we think about how people in the future will use, or how will we know that they're moving to this Web 3.0? What will be some of the indicators? And as we've talked about here in the different stages over the last day, we talk about a generational, right? And we look at and say, this was a study by Goldman Sachs, actually, just in the last few months, where they said, when we see the social lives and the gaming lives, and you all probably have seen the press with Microsoft's acquisition of Activision, a big gaming company. So we can't talk about, but we can only imagine why we would invest in a big gaming company. We see the social lives and the gaming lives come together, that they're no longer just gamers and people who have social interactions. Those are, we feel, probably are going to start to blend. And with that, like we said, people over 65 are watching about 4.6 hours of TV per week. But then when you look down, you look at Gen Z, 2.1, right? When we look at playing video games, still a small population is playing video games per se, but we look at the, over 65, 0.2 hours. Like, I'm on for 20 minutes, not really my thing, I'm out of here, right? Whereas Gen Z has almost an hour, but if you look at the social media and children under the age of 18, 5 hours. And I mean, I don't know about you all, but I do have teenage daughters. You're shaking your head. And I'm like, can you get off that phone? And I'm like, do you ever just talk to your friends? No. We text, Mom. We text. That's what we do. That's how we talk. I'm like, but you ever would you recognize your friend's voice if you actually talk to them? Probably not, because you don't know the person on the other end, their voice. But I do see that as kind of mingling together in the future and what are the technologies? And I'll go through a few Microsoft technologies, because that's where I'm from. But of course, there are similar technologies or emerging technologies from other tech companies as well. But this just to help you understand, what does a technology stack look like? Because you're going from the cloud, which we've talked about a lot in financial service, that's how we became digitally transformed, to the edge, where we actually start to bring things together. And we look at it and say, well, connectivity, IoT. Everybody's got one of these. Lots of people I've seen on these today, right? I still have a traditional watch too, though, kind of nostalgically. But I mean, this is not only tracking for financial services. Think about, it's tracking my heartbeat, it's tracking my steps, it's tracking what I listen to, it's tracking when I sleep, right? And you think, how does that apply to financial services? You can think in insurance. I've actually been working on some things in the last year where it looks at and says how we handle actuarial models. I'm working with a bank in Colombia that is saying, based on the data that we receive from wearables, we would then price insurance products differently, right? Because, you see it even things like an insurance on your car. right? Put an IoT device. If you're a good person going the speed limit, doing what you're supposed to be doing, you will then get a discount because you're a good driver, right? So these types of activities are starting to merge the physical world with a digital world as well. But you can read through, you'll have this presentation for everybody to download or view, so I don't need to drain all the technologies, but these are the enablers. So I always say the future is actually now, and you're building upon it for what that will look like and what could be, as you've seen today, the metaverse. So here's just one example. We have a product called Azure Precept. It's an AI model. Some of the things that are being used today, right? So in metaverse is like, oh, I'm digitally out there, but it's really not that far. And what I'm trying to paint a picture to you is that here there are building blocks that lead to there. No different when I said digital transformation. There's those building blocks that will lead you to the future, but you have to start building for now. And you see, we spent a lot of time on the time spent in queue. Are you 6 feet apart? That was a really big thing as the pandemic started. Also, we no longer have to just, love the times when we would just circle the parking lot, looking for that space, going up in the garage, coming down. Not necessary, right? I mean, you put an Azure Precept on it, you'll know how many spaces are available, you'll know where that space is available, and just small things that are, again, building blocks to the future. Trespass detection, another one, you can detect whether that's a person, it's an animal, how fast they're going, how slow they're going, what time they came. And one of the interesting things in another vertical is manufacturing, where training is happening for very dangerous jobs. Training is happening in what would kind of look like a metaverse. They put on a HoloLens, or they put on the glasses, and they start to work in the environment that's very dangerous to then see, and we see that also with like airlines, with simulations of crashes and things like that, that this sort of blending between the physical world and the virtual world. And in this you see that they're looking and saying, are you moving too close to an object that is going to hurt you, right? So this sort of danger zone detection. So where are we? The intelligent cloud and the intelligent edge coming together. So what does that look like? When we bring them together, we have to look at the AI, the artificial intelligence, and the ML, the machine learning that's associated with that. And when we look at that, we say in the intelligent edge and the intelligent cloud, there's then the connection that enables the intelligent cloud to be a digital twin. So what do we do first? We track the past, right? We were better prepared for the pandemic as a vertical in financial services because we had a financial crisis. And before the financial crisis, we had never seen anything like that. That started, I think I said the United States sneezed and the world caught a cold, right? Because of all of the systemic things that we had done prior to the financial crisis that then spread across the world and created a world crisis. But what we did was we had never known a time that had such a systemic loss since what was World War II, right? And then when this happened, we didn't have the models, we didn't have the prediction, but we used a lot of the models for pandemic to predict what we had seen previously. So looking at the past and then predicting the future. So what do we do then? After we look at the past, we monitor. We have a physical world, we have a digital world. And a lot of financial institutions who are older financial institutions, you'll see coming up like Bradesco has Next, right? You'll have the traditional bank coming up with a digital bank as well, because they feel that their traditional bank maybe not be moving fast enough, but that looking at having a physical presence and possibly a secondary digital twin virtual presence or a digital environment, and then monitoring between the two of them, connecting the two. Once we do that, we analyze. We analyze what's happening to bring the digital and the physical world together. And then synchronizing them. And you can think of it very logically, like look at your phone. If you use your phone and do a transaction with your financial institution, and then you go to the branch, or then you go to your desktop, they're synchronized. It's simple to see just the very basic building blocks that then takes you to an eventual state of the metaverse. Prediction. Prediction is the ultimate. Is this person likely to leave my financial institution? Is this person likely to have a heart attack and I need to change the insurance rates? Is this person likely to? The prediction of events is key, right? I mean, predicting the next pandemic, predicting the next whatever it is that's going to disrupt systemically these financial services, right? Prediction is key, and prediction is much, much easier in a digital environment than it is to play in the physical world. And ultimately, we simulate. Simulation is the Monte Carlo type of situations. Because how we're brought to our knees is really about not it's probable, but the possible. We've seen this with the pandemic. It wasn't probable that we would have the pandemic. It wasn't, I guess some people could have said it was maybe probable that we would actually have the financial crisis, but still people were not really thinking it was going to happen. But if we could simulate between a physical world and the digital world, we can then have better outcomes from these what we call black swan events, the events that are not likely to happen, but if they happen, they'll cause devastation. And I think that is sort of where we start to build on the cool, fun things in a metaverse that we talk about shopping and all that, but we start today with what we can do with these technologies to then build towards a future. And then lastly, the two worlds interact. They become seamless between a physical world and a digital world. And the two come together as one, seamlessly. And we've talked about some cool things like shopping, being in a metaverse and shopping, but it's no different to me than an extension of when I used to go into the physical store. And it's kind of interesting for me personally. I don't know how many of you all, but like when I first had the pandemic, before the pandemic, when we first going into it, I was like, I would never buy that online. I must feel it. I must touch it. I must be with it and know that it is, good quality. And that was gone, right? I was like, I may not be, I was like, strawberries, apples, those need to be delivered. My bread, that needs to be delivered. And next thing I knew, I was like, hey, they picked pretty good stuff. And I used, expensive shoes. I'd be like, I need to try them to make sure they fit well. I can walk well. And they're like, actually, I bought these Allbirds. It's kind of a brand, that's kind of, I live in Seattle, so it's one of those places, where we have those kind of brands, and so a lot of people wear them. So I was like, but they're, a little expensive. But then I bought 3 pairs, 4 pairs. And the next thing I knew, of course, since we were in the pandemic and we weren't dressing up as much, I had like a ton, which I never had before. I was like, Lululemon, that's me, that's me, that's me. And I was like, oh my gosh. The next thing I knew, I had bought, not cheap, but not super expensive, but I was buying things I previously thought I would never buy, right? So I think that's, again, that melding that our minds has leapt with the pandemic has pushed us to other places that we still would be more conservative about. And lastly, what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you a video. Super passionate about, by the way, because I think it gives a bigger picture in financial services. What I love, I took this job a year ago at Microsoft for managing the financial services industry for LATAM. I talk a lot about agriculture and agribusiness. Before I came to Microsoft, I was at PwC. I spent 6 months in India helping with the Gates Foundation of sustainable programs that brought people out of impoverished positions to where they actually could have, the normal, everyday sort of life of a sustainable for their families and for their future. Merely from just looking at agricultural crops was one of them, is looking at and having the farmers. We have technologies that put probes in the soil that then enable farmers to see the crop yield that they could get and what they need to do differently, water more, water less, put some nitrogen, do these things, and you can have better crop yields. The better crop yields enable them to be able to then sell, their goods, more goods at the market, and therefore make more money. And how does it apply to financial services? There's a lot of agribusiness lending I've seen in LATAM, as well as a great technology we've seen recently, which is microloans. So I'm a person, and we saw things like this crowdsourced lending through like organizations like Kiva, K-I-V-A, Kiva, where I could lend $20 to a person in Guatemala who's going to start up their, little sewing shop, and that's how they're going to make money. But now we see financial institutions doing micro loans, day loans, right? So I want to start, selling fruit at the stand. I can't afford it, right? So what happens is you give me the 20 equivalent. I'll use the US dollar currency because there's so many currencies in LATAM, but I use the equivalent of 20 US dollars, and then I get that for the day. I go to my wholesaler, and then I can pay him on my phone and just say, here, he takes a QR code, he pays on the phone, or you can go to, interestingly enough, if you don't have the QR code technology, or you don't have the 5G, 4G, and those types of technologies in more rural areas, you actually can have merchants who are enabled as almost like an ATM, and they dispense the loan, the $20 for the day, and then if it's through the phone, they can have the QR code that then takes a portion for the person, the seller, and takes a portion for the bank every day, and a portion, so you get the actually wholesaler who signs up, you get a portion for the wholesaler as well, so that dollar of sale is portioned out, so everybody gets a share. And if you decide then, if they don't make their $20 for that day, do I lend them another $10 for the next day, and what is your modeling for that? And you can use AI and ML. So very interesting things regarding farmers and crop yields and actually helping people become more of sustainability themselves. So I'm going to show you a video with that, and it'll talk a little bit about the overarching technologies.
Imagine our world today. People, vehicles, businesses, buildings, hospitals, factories, entire cities, and the billions of devices that connect us to this world and to each other. This is the physical world. But what if we can replicate that physical world into its digital twin? A digital twin that is bound to the physical world in real time, that we can experience in mixed reality, that we can collaborate with, that we can run simulations on and find what is important to us, that we can apply AI to learn, predict, and act, to save time and money, to reduce carbon, to preserve natural resources, to improve safety, to bring us all closer. This is already happening today. Across the world, organizations are taking advantage of this new wave of innovation that trends to an interconnectedness that enables the metaverse. Everything modeled in the metaverse mirrors the status of its physical twin, including the interactions and relations between everything else. By applying the power of the cloud, we eliminate boundaries of what this can do. The potential is limitless. We can now track and analyze data from connected environments to identify patterns, trends, and anomalies. We can now simulate any possibility, evaluate outcomes, determine the impact of any change or condition. We can now harness AI to perceive the physical world to improve and automate tasks, to give superpowers to your frontline workers. We can now give everyone in your organization the power to build apps and workflows, to collaborate with each other in this virtual space, to share and receive expertise at the right time with the right context in front of you, to move through the physical world and get relevant information about its digital counterpart when and where you need, using mixed reality. The Microsoft Cloud brings these capabilities together with the limitless computing power of the cloud and intelligent devices at the edge, and creates this framework for building immersive and impactful digital twin, mixed reality, and metaverse solutions.
So there you have it, what it could be in a real sense today of what we can imagine and what can happen, right? You saw in there factories, but you also saw farms, right? So I think the future is now. and super passionate about this area and the growth potential that we see. You know, we're not the boring bankers people think we are. We actually have, you know, can make a difference and have a lot of fun in doing it as well. But if anybody has maybe a question or two, without that, thank you, and appreciate your time.